Hey guys, it's Cassera, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite tropes in fantasy and science fiction. I read a lot more fantasy than I do science fiction, but some of these, I've read some really good science fiction books that do these tropes as well. So I'm definitely really excited to share these with you guys because these are the tropes that I just love seeing in books. Like, if the book has these tropes, I eat them up. With all of the tropes that I mentioned, I will be also recommending you guys a book that does this trope really well. So the first trope that I want to talk about is time travel. I love a good time travel trope. And it doesn't even matter like what kind of time travel is. If someone is going back in time or going to the future, especially if there are multiple timelines and they're like changing the timelines and things like that, I love them. It's one of my favorite things to see in both fantasy and science fiction. I feel like a book that does time travel can do no wrong. One book that I read this year recently that I really enjoyed because of the time travel elements in it is Recursion by Blake Crouch. Highly recommend it. It was really good. I didn't like the beginning as much, but once it gets to the actual time travel portion of it, it was really good. Like, it was really, really good. And I ended up giving that one 5 stars. The next trope that I want to talk about is multiple worlds, or even like the dream worlds kind of trope. There are like a couple different aspects of this trope. So the multiple worlds trope can be like multiple worlds that are completely different from each other and don't have any origins with each other or anything like that. Or it can be based on the multiple worlds theory in physics, in which like every choice that you make, there's another world in which you've made that choice basically. So like every possible outcome actually exists out there and you can travel to multiple different worlds. I love both of those tropes. And then there's also the dream world sort of trope where when we're dreaming, we're actually in a completely different world, which is the dream world. I love it when books explore these different possibilities, and I love the world building in multiple worlds books. I feel like you need to have really good world building in books that explore multiple worlds tropes. One book I read this year that I really ended up loving that is a good multiple worlds book is actually a trilogy. It's called the Firebird Trilogy by Claudia. It's a YA series. This one actually follows the many worlds physics theory, and it's also sci-fi, but I loved it because the main character kind of like moved between herself in different worlds and like took over that body, and it was just done really well, and I really enjoyed that series. I think I ended up giving that series like a 4.5 stars. They were really good, and I definitely recommend it. The next trope, it's not really a trope that I like to see, but something that I love to see in fantasy books is a good hard magic system. So for those of you who don't know what a hard magic system is, it's just a magic system that have rules that are consistent, that are always followed, and are also well known to the magic users. So a great example of a hard magic system, I think, is like one of the main examples that people use is the magic system in the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson, which is like one of my favorite series to talk about this, especially when it comes to hard magic systems, because there are different metals that people burn, and depending on which metal a person can burn, they have different powers. So whether it's pulling iron towards them or pushing steel away, I think that's what it is. It might be the opposite there or something like that. They have these specific parameters in which their abilities work, and then they can't work outside of the parameters. So I love this aspect because it just feels more real to me, because it's kind of like our scientific laws where there are certain things that we can do, and it seems amazing that sometimes we can do it. Like, for example, sticking magnets to a fridge. Like, it seems weird that magnets stick on a fridge, but if you understand why they stick onto the fridge, it's perfectly normal. And that's why I love hard magic systems, because it seems kind of weird that people can do this, but once you understand why they can do this, it seems very real, and it's a lot easier to suspend your disbelief when there's a hard magic system as opposed to a soft magic system that is never explained to the reader and doesn't have any real rules. So I love seeing hard magic systems in books. And that kind of goes for science fiction as well. Obviously it's not magic, but I love it when the author explains how the new technology actually works, rather than just saying, oh, we have this technology that has this outcome. If they actually explain the parameters of the technology and things like that, generally I feel like it works better within the story and makes the story feel more real. I just like knowing the explanations behind things, apparently. So the next trope that I really love exploring in fantasy and science fiction is the idea of immortality, resurrection, or reincarnation. So these are kind of like three different things as well, but basically the idea that we can defeat death in some way. I think the series that I read most recently that does this really, really well is the Arc of Scythe trilogy by Neal Shusterman. The third book in that trilogy, by the way, just came out. It's The Toll. It was fantastic. Really loved it. I actually have a review on that, so I'll link that up in the cards if you guys are interested in it. The reason why I love this trope is because it explores death in a different way. Usually books like this generally do have death and a lot of death in them, but it's able to explore the themes of deaths and how death affects people in very interesting ways, and I enjoy reading about that, especially in fantasy and science fiction. Oh, also another book that I recently read that I think does this really well is Pet Semetary by Stephen King. It does it really, really well also. Really enjoy that one. The next trope that I love seeing in fantasy and science fiction is the animal companion trope, when characters have an animal or magical animal or otherwise that they are really close to, both physically but also emotionally and even mentally. Sometimes they have like a mental link or something like that, and I really, really love it when they're able to either inhabit that animal or switch bodies with the animal or something like that. I always find that those links are very interesting just because animals are so different than humans, so you can kind of see things from an animal perspective, and generally it's entertaining the way animals think in these books rather than the humans. One book that does this really well, I think, is the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. There's a wolf who is Fitz's companion for a good amount of the series, called Night Eyes. He's like one of my favorite characters in the entire series. I love the entire storyline with him. The knowledge base that he brings to the story is really interesting compared to the knowledge base of all the humans. Another trope that I really love seeing in fantasy books is magic school. I don't know what it is about it. I think it's just because school is just a construct in our era that everyone kind of has to go through, and just putting this interesting spin on it, having it magic school rather than boring old like math and science and literature school, is really interesting to me. I just love that trope. I think it may be a bit of a nostalgic sort of thing for me because the Harry Potter series was really the series as a child that made me grow into and love reading as much as I do. But every time I get a good magic school book, I love it so much. One that I read this year that I really, really enjoyed was Vita Nostra by Marina and Sergey Dyachenkov. It's definitely like sort of a magic school book for adults, and it was really interestingly done. It's definitely like kind of a mind-bending book, but I loved every second of it. And the last trope that I absolutely love seeing in fantasy and science fiction is the can't tell lies trope. So this one is more of a subtle trope, I think. I love it because a lot of times with the can't tell lies trope, the characters who can't tell lies, because usually there are a group of people that can't tell lies, they speak in ways that they say one thing and mean a different thing. And I love just parsing out what they say and what they really mean in those conversations. It's just a fun trope because you have to use a lot of subtext and a lot of just like understanding how these characters are thinking in order to understand what's really going on in the story, and I really enjoy that. Also, I feel like the authors have to be really good at writing subtext in order to make these books actually work. I think the first time that I really saw the can't tell lies trope was in The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini, because when they talk in like the old tongue, I think is what they call it. I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read that book, but when they talk in that tongue, they can't speak untruths. This year though, a book that I feel like does the can't tell lies trope really well that I read for the first time this year is the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black, which includes The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and Queen of Nothing is coming out soon. The way the fairies talk in this book is so interesting, and you always know that they're not saying what they think they're saying. Like, for example, at the beginning of The Wicked King, one of the characters tells our main character that like someone you trust has already betrayed you. So we spend the entire book trying to figure out who has betrayed her, because we know that that character can't lie about that. So I love just like little things like that with the can't tell lies trope. Absolutely love it and definitely want to see it in more books. Let me know down in the comments what are some of your favorite tropes to see in fantasy and science fiction. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I post videos frequently in this channel, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.